All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Indie Spotlight, our 14th Indie Spotlight, if you will, and we've been doing these as separate shows for the last, I think, 5 weeks now, or 5 episodes, which has probably taken place over 10 weeks or so. Indie Spotlight, and tonight we're going to talk about Obvious Child, the film starring comedian actress Jenny Slate. It's an indie from last year. And this is also our least popular segment that we've done, but we believe in putting spotlights on these indies, and I mean there are several indies that we talked about earlier in the year that I'm very passionate about. I am running out of 2014 indies that I am passionate about. I've got one more coming next time that I'm going to recommend, but this is not my recommendation. This is J Money. So J Money, why don't you tell us a little bit about Obvious Child and why you're recommending it?
Sure. Well, Obvious Child stars Jenny Slate, a comedian who has done stand-up. She's been on Saturday Night Live. And I recommended it mostly because I thought it was sort of a refreshing take on the rom-com genre. It came out last year. There's a controversy at the center of the movie in the sense that the movie itself takes place about an unwanted pregnancy and the things that happen therein because of it. And that's pretty much all I want to say about it at this point. So I'll throw it back to you guys.
Well, so all right, so Davy Joe, how do you respond? And first of all, I didn't introduce everybody yet. I mean, because I was so in a hurry. So that's J Money, that's Drunk Davy, I'm JB, and we're back here talking about Obvious Child. All right, so J Money didn't give us much to start out with, Davy Joe. What did you think of the film? First tell me when and how you watched it.
It's a short film. I watched it before work one morning last week, and I liked the movie a lot. I thought it was laugh out loud funny, and I thought there was a lot of movies that feature stand-up comedy. The stand-up comedy isn't always strong, but this was, and I really appreciated it.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that individual statement, first of all, and say I thought the stand-up was very not funny, and which is one of the many reasons why I hated this film passionately. So we just talked about Southpaw, where it was me and Davy Joe versus J Money. Now I'm the odd man out. I'm very against this film, and the stand-up was one reason, so I completely disagree with Davy Joe's last statement. I thought that was a preposterous statement from my point of view. The other thing is I find Jenny Slate herself and the character she plays to be extremely unlikable and uninteresting, and I think that's the main thing that causes this film to suffer for me. And it's similar to how there was the performances and characters in Southpaw that we just reviewed that elevated the film for me. Here is the exact opposite. It was really the script too, in that it creates such an unlikable character that I do not want to follow or be interested in. I don't think I laughed once. So, J Money, let's start with the stand-up because that seems to be the first thing. You're the tiebreaker on that point. I assume you liked it?
Yeah, but I think just going back to what you're saying in general, this is a movie that really is about Jenny Slate one way or the other. This is a movie where if you don't necessarily like the comedian at the center of it, then I understand why you would not necessarily be interested in this movie to begin with. And I think that's probably true for any kind of movie that involves a comedian who does stand-up doing her stand-up in a film. I mean, you have to kind of be on board with her style, whoever's style of comedy to begin with. Before you can really kind of let yourself into the movie. So, it's not really surprising that you didn't like it based on those things, and I'm not really surprised that you don't like Jenny Slate to begin with. Honestly, it just feels like she's not in your vein to begin with. I
was going to change the subject, but now I'm curious what you mean by that.
I think that her style of humor might be too... a lot of her humor is...
Are you going to say heady, or are you going to somehow insult my intelligence?
No, actually, it's the opposite. For me, I actually consider her really sort of charmingly immature, and there's a quality to her stuff that I think is silly, but also...
Charmingly lowbrow?
Charmingly lowbrow. How about that? Let's say that. And I think that there's a lot of things about her character in this movie, for instance, which are kind of annoying. There's a lot of things about watching her character grow through this experience where you feel like, yeah, she's very young and she's very dumb and she's trying to figure things out for herself. And so I also understand why the character can be divisive for certain people. On the other hand, I also think that there was such a refreshing take on the situation they were in, and I also think that, for me personally, I find her charming. There are other things.
What was refreshing? What about it exactly was refreshing? Because that actually was going to lead to my next point, which I was going to compare it to Southpaw again, in which I feel like the plot is similarly trite. I feel like it is similarly trite, and the main difference between the two films are the performances and characterizations and the charisma of those involved, on-screen talent that separates the two films. And I feel like they're actually similarly trite, stories that we've seen 1,000 times before.
I'm not sure. Well, I don't know where you've seen this story 1,000 times before. This is a movie that's about a woman who has an unwanted pregnancy, and it's not about an abortion. That's one of the most charmingly refreshing things about this movie to begin with.
I mean, I feel like that happened. That happened a lot, particularly in older films that tackled unwanted pregnancies.
They swept it under the carpet. They didn't. No, they swept under the carpet. That's different. There's a quality of this movie where they're discussing actively, outright, what she as a woman and the character in this movie wants in this movie. It's not about whether or not she should have it. It's not about whether or not she should just let it go.
So you're thinking that's progressive in some way.
What's that?
So you're thinking it's progressive in some way.
Oh, it's a very progressive movie, and it's obviously the kind of thing where if you don't like the politics in it, you're not going to like this movie. If you don't like the kind of cavalier attitude they had about it, you're not going to like this movie. I understand that. That's fine. I just think that it was interesting to see a rom-com where we've seen the idea of an unwanted pregnancy be an issue in rom-coms before, definitely, but I don't feel like we've seen it treated in this way before. I don't feel like we've seen it become something that it's not a question of should I, shouldn't I. It's a question of how will this affect my relationship. For the most part, every movie that deals with abortion has to answer the question, should I, shouldn't I? It's always about the woman's struggle to decide whether or not she wants it or she doesn't. And
what are the politics that are to be disagreed with here? I'm unclear on that.
Well, there are plenty of people that were not happy about this movie being made because it featured her.
Are you talking about like Republicans?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of conservatives that were unhappy about this movie. There was an active, outright sort of boycott of this movie at the time when it came out. It was a small movie, so it wasn't like there was a lot of it going on. But
I was about to say, if you want to make a point about a movie, I suggest the one that maybe opened in more than 1,000 theaters.
But it's still very, it was obviously an influential movie. It was a movie that was covered by a lot of different media outlets. It was a movie that got press because of what it was about, and it's a movie that's influential because of it. So it's not.
Would you say it got out of all the indies we've done, it's the one that's gotten the most buzz?
No, definitely not. And, to be fair, I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's a charming movie. I think that there's qualities to it I like a lot. But I also feel like it's a good rental, for instance. I think that, again, you have to like Jenny Slate. If you don't like Jenny Slate, you're not going to like this movie. So there's a lot of things on it that are really kind of indicative of how you feel about a lot of the issues already at play. I will say that I also appreciated some of the other side performances. I think that, I'm blanking the actor's name, but her beau.
What I was going to say is I thought the one saving grace of the movie was Gaby Hoffman. I thought she gave a terrific performance, honest, real character.
Fun. Yep, I enjoyed Gaby Hoffman. It's a movie that it winds up, and I guess to your point, you kind of know where it's going to go because there was a lot of things about it ahead of time, and either you're comfortable with the way it goes, either you're comfortable with kind of watching the follow through, or you think it's trite. I guess to your point.
Well, I certainly don't. I didn't feel any political issue with the film, and certainly I have no problems with women or anything like that. I'm not a misogynist. I like women a lot, as Davy Joke can tell you. But so I don't think my issues had anything to do with with anything the movie was suggesting. I think that my issues were solely focused on, and I think you said you understood that, this main character was not appealing, and therefore it was. Well,
no, I said I understand why some people might not find her appealing. I said that she.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm saying, you understand that possibility exists, given the nature of her character. David, you haven't said anything in a while.
Yeah. Well, I was charmed by her, and I think that I can see how it could be off-putting, and I think that you could, and I also think that this movie, look, there are any number of reasons to not like a movie, and it doesn't necessarily have to be because of the the subject matter, but I do think that this movie is pretty unique in the sense that the decision was just a foregone conclusion. There was no, I guess I'm sort of reiterating what Jay Money said, but it's just sort of, To me it was a very unique and refreshing look at the issue.
So because the final decision was a foregone conclusion, it was refreshing, as opposed to it actually like the character being in conflict.
Well, I mean, it would have descended into just time wasting. We've seen that a million times, and we know where everyone stands, and.
But I mean, like, if it's being a foregone conclusion, then you know where everyone stands here as well.
Well, I don't think entirely.
So why dwell on it?
I don't know if that's.
So why make the movie at all? Why tell a story if there's no conflict?
Because I don't think that's entirely fair to say that. I don't think that you say that.
I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm just sort of poking holes in this theory.
No. What I'm saying is that what we're doing is we're talking about what it isn't, and that's, they didn't do that. And they could have. They could have easily descended into that, and I appreciated that. I just thought that I don't know. I thought that I felt for her, and I thought that her ability to show humor in this horrible situation was just it was funny. I laughed a lot.
Yeah, I thought it felt forced. I thought it felt like like forcing her act into this narrative.
I don't feel like that. I mean, I think that we're burning the lead in some ways by saying that it's a movie about about foregone conclusion. I think it's about a movie that's about how a lot of women actually deal with this, and I think that we don't generally see that. I mean, at the beginning of this, you started to compare this between our issues with Southpaw or my issues with Southpaw in our last broadcast, and how this might have been the same, because what you were saying, it's something we've seen before a lot of. I don't know what you're referring to. I'd love to hear movies that you're referring to that you think actually represent the things that we're seeing here before. Because
certainly on the indie scene, like, and I go to these festivals and I go to these. I mean, like, now maybe the things don't happen exactly the same way, but I mean, certainly this concept of unwanted pregnancies, and I mean, I can't audit it against all of them and figure out which ones that handled it the same way and which ones they didn't. But I definitely felt like.
But that's not the issue. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm interrupting.
I'm done.
I was going to say. I mean, I don't. For me, it's not the concept of an unwanted pregnancy, because yeah, you see that a lot. For me, it's the concept of the unwanted pregnancy not being the focal point. It's about a relationship with this guy and how it changes itself. I mean,
and that's the other issue is, I mean, I thought the guy was very boring. I mean, like I said, the only real character I cared about was Gaby Hoffman. I mean, the guy was very flat, two-dimensional, no depth, really uninteresting to me.
He was sort of an ideal, not even realistic, I would say, kind of impression of what your Prince Charming might be in this scenario, which, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, as much as I understand that it was not the most fleshed out character. I thought it was kind of.
But by your own point here, like, if this is what the movie about, and this is what you like about the movie, but this is a major flaw about about this thing that you just said. This is what the movie's really about.
I don't think it's a major flaw. I think it's about what Jenny Slate is representing what she thinks is the ideal situation. I don't think that's flawed.
But I mean, like, based on what you said earlier, you talked about authenticity in our Southpaw review, and here we have this flat character. I'm still talking. We have this flat character, two-dimensional character, which is the furthest thing you can have from authenticity, and you're giving it a free pass.
And because the authenticity in this movie is not about the characters, it's about Jenny Slate's experience and what she's trying to communicate here.
So authenticity can as long as one character is authentic, then that's okay.
No, as long as the concept behind a movie is authentic, that's okay. And the concept behind this movie is, as far as I'm concerned, authentic. The concept behind Southpaw, as far as I was concerned, was not.
Okay, so as long as the concept is authentic, everything else around it doesn't need to be.
No, I'm not saying that either, but I'm saying that carries this movie for me particularly.
All right, David, Joe, help me out. You don't just say something.
Well, I think that the performance, or maybe just the way the character was written of the leading male, it's not. It's almost like they said, "Hey, here you go. Stay out of Jenny's way." And I think that's a valid point. And it's ultimately it didn't ruin the movie for me, but I think that the character was not great, and the performance was, I don't know. I can't even really criticize the performance because they didn't give him a whole lot.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's for me one flaw in many. I mean, it's really not. It's not okay, but I mean, like, there's okay to have flat characters around round characters, but I mean, like, he was essential to this plot, and needed to be more drawn out. As far as I'm concerned, as far as screenwriting is concerned, it is it would be interesting in theory, although not really in practice, if the concept was to purposely make him two-dimensional as a sort of
as the embodiment of an icon.
How women are, in men's romantic, when things are told from a men's perspective, how women, the love interests of women are generally two-dimensional characters. If it was some sort of statement on that, maybe that would have some level of interestingness, but I don't think that was the case.
You don't think it was? Because I feel like it was.
Even if it was, it doesn't make it okay. Even if the roles were reversed and it was the man's perspective and she was two-dimensional, I don't care how hot she was. She'd be uninteresting to me, and it'd be because it's not that challenging to write a three-dimensional character.
I don't think that was the point of this, and whether or not you find him charming or not, that's up to you ultimately. But I think that he was ultimately trying to represent, an idealistic form, sort of this, again, the Prince Charming. And it's something that I don't think is foreign to this genre in terms of rom-coms. I don't think it's unusual to see that sort of portrayal of at least one of the characters.
Let's.
Well, that's time, guys. I had a couple more things that I wanted to bring up. Do you want me to try and squeeze one in or no?
Yeah, squeeze one in.
The script. I thought it was a little meandering. Case in point, the whole little subplot with David Cross. It was a whole we're on the narrative thread, and then there's this sideline, and which is an exact point when you were in a test group for my feature, J Money. You made a great point about something that feels like a right turn, and then you go back again, and I cut it out.
Yeah.
You were right. So this is another example of because it's David Cross, it doesn't get cut out, but it doesn't feel like it belongs in this movie.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that David Cross is there as star power, and that's pretty much it.
But that's not okay.
Well, I think that I guess what I would say is, yeah, they could have tightened that up. Did it ruin the movie for me? No.
So if I had to sum this up, I'd say actually Davy Joe probably likes this movie the most, and you're in the middle of this on this one.
That's possible. I think it's a nice movie. I think it's worth seeing. I don't think it. I think it's fine rental, for instance. It's not my favorite movie, but I thought it was fine.
It was not. Yeah, I did not like it. One movie that I similarly didn't like, because similarly not liking as a bonus indie spotlight, but a movie that I also didn't like, and which is why we haven't talked about it, and also because I didn't like the female at the center of it, her character, and her meanness, is a movie called Appropriate Behavior, also 2014 indie. I don't know if you guys have seen that. But if you liked Obvious Child, I would definitely recommend the audience compare and contrast with Appropriate Behavior. I think Appropriate Behavior is a little more interesting and a little more well-rounded, even though similarly the character at the center of it is downright hateable, and that's unfortunate. All right, guys, closing thoughts before we got to wrap this up. Anything? J Money?
Just a nice little movie. See it if you want.
Or don't. Davy Joe?
If it's between this and Land Ho. See this one.
Land Ho! See Land Ho! It's more engaging.
Oh, hey,
slightly more engaging. But definitely Land Ho is better than Appropriate Behavior or Obvious Child. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to tell you what next week's indie is, but we're going to have trivia questions over the course of the week. But next week's indie will be on August 11th, I believe at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and August 11th, I believe, is a Tuesday. But right now, the most important thing is the very next classic movie of the week. I know you're as excited as I am for the classic movie of the week coming up in 7 minutes. And right now, we're going to talk about what the Sight and Sound poll, which is the definitive poll of the greatest movies of all time, comes out every 10 years. This past 2012 was the last one that came out, and they had a new #1 film, and it was Vertigo, and that's the film we're going to talk about next. Tune in about 7 minutes. We'll see you then.